The COB is presented by Rabobank. Awarded 2023 SMSF Savings Bank of the Year by Mozo.
Welcome to the COB on this Tuesday afternoon. All of the stuff you need to know about the day in business and markets from us, Nadine and Danielle, aka. How are you?
I'm good. Yes, it's been a very nice day, I have to say. We always like to see green on screen at the end of the day.
And we've got it. Again, it was looking a bit touch and go there to start the session. And I was chatting about markets, as you do, around noon, and said, oh, it's still a bit negative, weak, down about 1/10 maybe of a percent. And then by the time I was on air at 1 here on Ausbiz, same sort of setup as yesterday.
Absolutely. So we've got the ASX 200 up almost 14 points or 0.2%. And there we go. CBO 200 up almost 4 points and almost 0.3%. It also kind of coincides around when those surveys came out, which we will touch on later.
We will. Look, not as high as we were at this time yesterday, but any green on screen, hey, we'll take it. So we are watching E-minis in the United States negative, and they were negative throughout most of the day. It's one of our three themes, isn't it? You mentioned that consumer versus business confidence read. I think metals and miners have done a lot for the market so far this trading week. And then it's just, it's this weight that we've got on our hands for the inflation read out of the United States.
Yeah, totally. So as per, every month now we have this thing where we're all focused on, some of us more than others, but it is going to be this CPI reading, which will be out 10:30 Wednesday time, 10:30 p.m. tomorrow night. So markets really probably not going to do too much in the run up to that. As you said, Nadine, we've had a lot of strength in the materials stocks, haven't we? Quite a bullish outlook there, or not outlook, but a more bullish move in iron ore prices, which has lifted everything higher. But I thought those sentiment surveys were really interesting. So the poor old consumers really struggling, whereas business seemed to perk up a little bit in August. Maybe it was the Matildas.
Yeah, well, possibly. NAB Chief Economist Alan Oster did not mention the Matildas in the note, which I had read, but it was really across the board, wasn't it? Yeah. The big exception, of course, being the retailers. Yep. However, even when it came to, say, car retailing, which saw some normalization, is what Alan said. So it wasn't really a reflection of a huge slowdown. It's just sort of normalization after some of the extremes of the past few years. He said it doesn't necessarily even reflect future demand or weakness in future demand there. So it was employment, it was trading, it was profitability, all ticking up in the month of August. But consumers. So I thought it was interesting, even though we've seen rates on hold for 3 months in a row, not feeling any better. In fact, that index dropped by 1.5%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think consumers are genuinely concerned that, some of them, there's still a lot to roll on to these variable rates. All the rate hikes haven't been passed on yet. So it's really interesting. I'm picking up, certainly from the credit markets. It was really interesting today with Ronnie Green. Great chat. He says demand now for treasuries, corporate bonds is really high. He said investors are getting very concerned about the run up into the year end. He said, put your seatbelts on, folks.
Yeah, well, I had a chat with Justin Tyler from Daintree Capital. All of the interviews that we name drop here are available online if you'd like to take a listen. He was talking about Aussie investment grade credit, saying that it's hot right now.
It is hot.
Such a sweet spot.
Yeah.
But to your point about investor demand, he said, obviously they weren't that interested in credit over the past few years. He said, but even family offices now are, getting into this market in a big way, 3-year time. Anyway, so I'm not going to tell you everything that was in the interview, but I thought it was really interesting. And foreign capital coming into the market as well. Another real focal point over the past few days has been property, part and part because one of our what do we say, compatriots are holding this property summit, but also, Still movement in the space. So Centuria Capital yesterday finalized a mandate with an institutional investor when it comes to industrial property. So I spoke with Centuria Capital today. It's up online. And just the demand that is coming through for industrial and international demand for Australian industrial assets in particular.
Wow.
Because we can own land outright, because of the demand, because you can't do so in many other parts of the Asian region. I thought that was an interesting insight into some of the dynamics that are going on out there as well.
And industrial captures data centers as well, which is really interesting, because I saw one of the super funds is actually getting involved now in data centers as well, and was what drove Goodman's share price to those highs, because they are now doing that as well.
Yeah, so there's plenty of interviews online that you can check out from today. That's just scratching the surface. Let's take a little stroll, shall we, through some of the sectors. Energy, a bit of a bummer to start with energy when you consider we had a positive session all in all, but you can see there we've got oil sort of treading water. We've got some big reports that are due on the supply side. So that is helping to cap some of the enthusiasm that we've seen around oil. We've also got, OPEC, obviously, which will be updating its monthly reports on Tuesday. What's really interesting
is America as slightly turning a blind eye to Iranian oil coming onto the market. So we spoke in one interview about the changing geopolitics around the oil market. So the alliance between Saudi Arabia and America seems to have gone by the by. And yes, it's quite interesting. So we could see more supply from Iran.
Now, Viva Energy,
we couldn't find anything
had reports in the AFR that there's a big block trade for Viva Energy, and that it's that commodity trading juggernaut, Vitol, that may be looking to sell a big chunk in Viva, and so that has put a lot of pressure on the share prices.
That's why it's down 6% or so today.
Healthcare, what's happened there? We're still
Green on screen.
Yeah,
it's nice to see across the board. Even ResMed finding some love, which will happen eventually. And Telix continuing to do well, which is quite interesting, as well as Ramsay. So even the stocks like Ramsay and ResMed that were sold off post the reporting season in the green today. So we'll take that.
We sure will. And then we get to the pièce de la résistance, you could say.
The big miners, and again across the board moves, particularly it looks like the money particularly flowing into the more volatile Fortescue metals up almost to $20, and Rio Tinto up 1.8%, and BHP over $1. And I did have a great chat with Sean Hickman at Market Matters, and he was saying they're really liking the space and they've been back in buying BHP recently, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see Newcrest Mining down, but because we saw a lot of the other gold miners rising today. Northern Star's up by 1.3%, and consider this your last reminder of the day about the Gold Rush virtual investor event that we're holding Thursday, 11 a.m.
We're going to play Goldfinger music?
Yeah, good idea. Good idea.
Let's have a bit of Bond.
Bit of bulls versus bears, a little bit of explorer versus producer, a little bit of, Aussie versus overseas when you consider sovereign risk. So we'll talk about all of that and get a few stock picks from our guests as well. Telcos. Bit of a mixed picture here.
Aussie Broadband continues to be one of the favourite stocks in that sector, and that up about 1.7%.
And in the banks. So we saw the banks proving a bit of a weight on the market overall.
Yeah, well, they were firmer yesterday off the higher bond yields, but, obviously not much happening there now.
And you in the morning stand-up, we do a little powwow each day in the newsroom. We're talking about Jamie Dimon and some of the comments that he was making around the banks in the US.
Indeed. So Jamie, obviously a little bit of self-interest, which always rules. So the US regulators are trying to increase the capital ratios for the US banks, and he's just saying they're doing way too much compared to the rest of the world. But equally, I was chatting with Morningstar yesterday, and he said, these big Aussie banks, politicians like to have a poke at them now and again. So, just keep it on the radar when, they're sometimes quite big targets.
Okay, shall we talk about some of the stories out there? Look, there wasn't a lot of corporate news, but we did get confirmation that Australia's richest person, Gina Rinehart, has indeed secured that chunk of Liontown. So getting a bit of influence perhaps around the board table could be the MO. Some say, could be a precursor to some sort of, out and out bid for Liontown, whether or not that is what comes to fruition. We'll
have to wait and see, hey?
Yeah, late in the piece, comes after due diligence has been granted. Look, a few little stores, I should say smaller stories out there. Imugene was up again. It got a patent confirmed.
Yes, in Japan, I believe. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Bapcor, one of the best performers, but I could only see a change in director's notice for that one. And Lovisa, well, it was trading ex-dividend today. So there wasn't really a lot. No. So stock of the day was not a stock, it was a sector. It was the gold sector. Let's listen in to what David Lane and Philip Pepe had to say.
Gold Road is one of those ones that's emerging. So they've got their resource and are building that out. There's a couple. We've got a speculative buy on Pantero and Red 5, which are more in that explorer type space. But historically, that's a speculative end of the market. There's a lot of people who like to play there. To be honest, I don't spend too much time trying to bet which one's going to succeed or not.
Large is always better. I own Northern Star, pays a good dividend. Performance been mixed, but I kind of like that one. If it's, you don't buy a resource stock for a dividend, but if it's spitting out cash and paying a dividend, isn't spending too much on capital expenditure, I think it's worth a look.
Two very different takes there. Philip Pepe, more conservative, likes to go, cash flow, pay a dividend, Northern Star, whereas David, looking at some of the smaller gold miners. So as per usual, it's what floats your boat. Yeah,
absolutely, particularly when it comes to those miners. Let's see what's floating Harry Watt's boat today. He's joining us from Shaw and Partners in Market Matters with a bit of a market wrap. Hey, Harry. 2 days, we've seen a bit of momentum building in the afternoon. What do you put it down to?
Well, just a bit of buying support coming through the market. We've seen, like you said, early morning lows, both today and yesterday. A bit of buying support kicking back in. Your market has been a little bit weak back end of last week. So, a little bit more confidence around the market from our perspective. Good to see some buying there. There's not a great deal of news hitting the screens at the moment, obviously. Coming off the back of reporting season, we're still slowly picking up into this month's economic data at the moment. So not a great deal in terms of news to drive the market. It's really good to see some buying coming through. I think that's a really good sign for investor positioning and investor confidence going forward over the next couple of weeks.
Harry, do you think it's any overseas buying? Because it just seems to have coincided with afternoon sessions. Is that just, purely coincidence versus anyone re-rating Australia possibly off the back of a more optimistic China?
I definitely think it probably comes down to that overseas buying. You tend to see that afternoon buying pick up when it is overseas money. We've had a lot of concerns around China over the last few weeks. Those concerns are starting to abate a little bit. There are some signs that they're, looking after their currency and then perhaps maybe putting some money to work into their economy as well, which is a really good sign for Aussie stocks. We've seen that today in the iron ore names in particular. Iron ore price has been really strong. Fortescue Metals, you had mentioned earlier, that's been a really big winner today on that intraday buying as well. So that's a surefire sign that it is coming on the back of that China news and that China, perhaps some economic support coming through there, and probably is that international money picking up that story and then picking up Fortescue, BHP and Rio on the back of that.
So you mentioned, we're in that lull after reporting season, still assessing companies, of course, but there's not been a lot of corporate news. So what is it, in fact, that you keep yourself sort of busy on? Is there a particular sort of sector that you're doing some heavy lifting on? I know yesterday we were talking about a lot of the pressure that the healthcare space had come on under and, maybe opportunities there. Gold seems to be gaining a bit of luster right now. What are you watching?
Well, yeah, you picked the eyes out there. I think today it's gold and healthcare. We wrote about those two sectors this morning in our Market Matters report. It's sort of a space, that healthcare space, that's been really under pressure the last few months. They had a pretty disappointing session through August with reporting basically Ramsay, ResMed, all the big names basically disappointing across the board. That sector's massively underperformed, particularly up against that healthcare. Well, the healthcare sector's massively underperformed, particularly up against the tech sector. So it's probably a time to start looking at where you're picking the eyes out and where you're putting money to work there. The gold sector's been an interesting one that's starting to find its form. At the moment, we've had Newcrest that's down a little bit today. It looks like there's a few block trades going through in that name. That's probably on the back of the takeover bid that's coming through. So people trying to sell out of Newcrest, perhaps looking at some other gold names we like Northern Star and Evolution at the moment here. So there are some sector rotation themes that you can pick up. It's sort of been the aim of the game over the last 12 months anyway. It's this market really hasn't gone anywhere, but sectors in particular have outperformed for months. And I think those outperformance periods have sort of run its course in a lot of ways. So probably taking some money out of tech and finding some money into gold and healthcare is what we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Just one in the resources space. I spoke with a fund manager today who's pretty bullish on MinRes for various reasons. We have seen, it's obviously more diversified. It's got the services side, but it has been lagging at around $68. Harry, do you guys like MinRes?
It's a stock we've got on our radar. We've got a small allocation to it at the moment. It's I think market's got bullish themes coming through on iron ore, but they've got some massive concerns about their lithium exposure. Big capex spend coming through from MinRes. Overall, I think it's probably a good way to allocate some money to that riskier end of town, having that support in terms of having that iron ore and those mining services businesses in the side as well. So they're going to see cash flow in the door. It's probably not our number one pick at the moment. It has started to it's sort of struggled around that $60 a share area. But in saying that, if you want exposure to lithium and those sort of riskier end of the commodity spectrum, MinRes is probably a good way to play it, having that sort of more defensive end of the market tied up and getting that income and getting those earnings coming through there to fund the capex that's going to have to come through over the next few years.
Well, you've wrapped the day in a bow for us nicely. Of course, still a lot of focus coming on the data later in the week, jobs and US inflation, in case you hadn't heard, Harry. I'm sure you have. We will look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
So, Danny, market leaders, I think we've sort of mentioned quite a few of them.
Yeah.
But let's take a look here.
Link continues to find some buying. And again, I don't think there's any new news there. It's probably just a case of it just got so battered around. People may be positioning for some upside there. Interesting, Pilbara, because they came out with an update a couple of days ago and the share price was sold down, but since then it's rallying quite sharply. And whereas Imogen, as you said, they got that approval from the Japanese.
They've had a couple of updates coming through lately. I think yesterday or the day before, it would have been yesterday, they had some sort of an FDA tick. I'm not saying approval, but some sort of a marker. These biotechs are so fascinating insofar as they're constantly, having to pass these hurdles to then get onto the next phase of development of their technology or their product. So they usually move when they get any of this sort of positive confirmation. Ingenia Communities, that's one that we don't see on the list very often, but it's up by about 4% again. I couldn't tell you why. There's no news that I can see. And Megaport, look, I was speaking with Jess Amir from Moomoo earlier on today. I didn't realize that it's up about 51, 52%.
This year.
So she actually named Megaport and Ingham's, if you're interested in going back and listening to that, as a couple of companies that are pretty good in terms of, if you're looking for diversification, if you're looking for companies that may do well, even if we continue to sort of grind away for the remainder of the year.
Absolutely. And from memory, I think Megaport did something. It's just not the data center AI story. I think they're going to being more cash flow positive from memory, but I'd have to check.
Well, they did have a guidance upgrade sort of recently down towards the end of August.
Yeah, but the share price was moving before that. Anyway.
Flipping the page to some of the laggards, and Viva Energy, we mentioned already that there are rumors that there's going to be a big sell-off in a I think it's a quite significant stake, but 40%. Soraya Resources, it was higher yesterday on news of some funding coming through for a project.
US.
Giving a lot of that back today. BrainChip, you never really know why it's up or down, but it's down today, off by 5%.
And Lovisa went ex-dividend, for anyone that wants to know. So that was the dividend there was 31%, 70% franked. So if we have a look, the share price was off a little bit more than that. But nevertheless, it's interesting that a lot of the other ones that went ex-dividend are not up there. So we had TPG and what else? Blue Scope Steel, News Corporation, a few others as well. It is the season.
Tis the season. We've got more tomorrow, including Brambles that I can see there, Dusk, IGO goes ex-div,
Evolution.
As well. Small cap leaders and laggards, just quickly here. Select Harvests actually is one of the stories. They've actually updated the market today and saying that they are expecting to see a pretty good season coming through. So positive outlook from Select Harvest, sending its shares up by 11%.
Hopefully that doesn't mean higher almond prices for us.
You like your almonds?
Yes, like my almonds.
I do enjoy my almonds myself. I'm not an almond milk person though. I think it just sucks the joy out of them.
Exactly.
And you can see here just a motley crew of resources names here on your screen right now, primarily. Look, tonight, if we think about what we've got to do, we've got the Zoo Investor Survey to mull over in Germany. And the NFIB, so that's a small business survey coming out in the US. But don't forget, it's the latter half of the week that we're getting the big ones, including the ECB. And next week, I just realized we've got the BOE as well.
As well as the Fed meeting, isn't it? Yeah, so you've got a blackout period at the moment with people none of the Fed officials talking, but we'll all be waiting, dare I say, for that Wednesday evening CPI and then the PPI the day after.
Yeah, all right. Well, tomorrow here, we will be looking for PPI from Japan. And so it's tomorrow evening that we get the August CPI data, but it doesn't look like there's much on the docket for us tomorrow.
No, a bit quiet by the looks of it, and probably the market will be quite quiet because generally the traders don't like to take too much of a position going into those big data reads. And shall we check on the markets?
I think we shall.
Closed? Yeah, so
up by 0.2%.
It does look that way. Yeah, 7,206 on the ASX 200, 14.6 points, up 0.2%. And there we go, SIBO 200 up 3.86 points, or almost 0.3%. So we will take a lovely green on screen for this Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, we were joined around the region by Japan, which finished up by about 1%. But elsewhere, the Chinese markets, they're not dramatically negative, but looking more negative than our screen at this current time. So look, I think we can take it for what it is, a positive session, second in a row for the local market. And we've sort of detailed what's coming tonight. Not a lot of breaking news that I can see coming off my screen.
Do you know what is interesting? That ARM IPO has been really heavily oversubscribed. So it's quite interesting because a lot of the big chip manufacturers are actually buying into it as well. So I always feel like we're going to buy into it so no one else can take it over. But yeah, really oversubscribed. So that's a positive for markets.
Just on the UK, regular wages growing by 7.8%. So the UK labour market softened in July, but very strong wage growth. The BOE has a tough job ahead of it. Why would you want to be a central banker right now?
Oh, it's a thankless task, really, isn't it?
It sure is.
Anyway.
Just look, I already mentioned this Gold Rush event, we're calling it, the virtual investor events that we hold. So just putting that address up on the screen if you'd like to register. And don't forget, we know people work. We know that you've got lives. Everybody can't sit for half an hour. I think it might go about 40, 45 minutes on Thursday morning. So if you register, it's free, and it means that you get to watch it on demand as well.
Fantastic. All very exciting. Gold finger, dare we say. Anyway, well,
we will say goodbye for today, shall we?
Exactly. Okay, bye everyone.
The COB is presented by Rabobank. Awarded 2023 SMSF Savings Bank of the Year by Mozo.